been sending me messages on Instagram and Facebook just telling me how much they're enjoying it. And I want to let you know I'm also just like a total fanboy on this show because I'm interviewing all my heroes. So I want to let you all know I'm so excited. And before I introduce today's guest, please make sure you check out Open Studio and all the various courses that I have on there. I'm also really thrilled because last week I had a chance to film a new course, which is very specifically focused on how to get the gig. Obviously, you know, I have a new book out, The Musician's Career Guide, and so I've been getting a lot of requests on how do you really focus on topics that are very much gig focused. So I'm really looking forward to you all checking that out. So we got some great things coming up with Open Studio. Also, I'm sure you can notice the new setup. I got 2 new cameras and, you know, you got my drums in the shot. So I want to thank the incredible team at Open Studio. With that said, I'm still working through a couple of technical things, so I may have to do a couple little cool things during the interview today, but it won't be affected, and Peter's brilliance definitely won't be sidelined by that. So I want to introduce our guest today, Peter Erskine. I first really came to the knowledge of him probably by the time I was a young kid. I'm sure many of you know about Modern Drummer Magazine. And for those that don't know, Modern Drummer Magazine is simply an editorial piece that features a lot of great drummers and everything from, you know, what drummers need to know, also as it pertains to, you know, music stuff, to gear stuff. And that was really kind of my insight to the outside world because growing up into Jacksonville, Florida, I really didn't get that chance. So anyway, this guy was in Drummer's World, or excuse me, in Modern Drummer every week or a month or whatever. Like, he was in everything. And so I started seeing his face then, but then I think I really started to understand his brilliance when I started working with Kurt Elling. Kurt asked me to join his band and said, "Hey, Ulysses, I really want you to check out a couple drummers." And the first one he said was Peter Erskine. He said, "Man, I really want you to get into the musicality that he's dealing with. I want you to learn how to really play over the bar in the same way because you're coming out of sort of that very like kind of straight ahead prestige recording, you know, vibe, which is great, but I need you to really tap more into your musicality." And Peter was the first stop on that train. So I want to let Peter know before he gets on, I'm also hugely inspired by him, even entrepreneurially. I was checking out his website last night and I'm just like, man, like all of these great things that he's doing is something that I've aspired and will continue to aspire to. And I really feel like he is the benchmark of just the equality of brilliance in drumming, music, entrepreneurship, and he is a true living treasure. So without further ado, welcome Mr. Peter Erskine. Yeah. What's up, man?
Well, that was glowing and an overly generous introduction, but thanks so much. I return the compliments back your way, infinity.
Well, thank you so much, man. Peter, I know that you've spent a lot of time being interviewed over the course of your career, man. I mean, everybody has interviewed you at this point. So I would actually love to shift this interview in a perspective of things that you haven't had a chance to share throughout the years so that our audience can have kind of a unique perspective of checking you out. So I think the first thing I'd love to know is, you know, what would you like to share with us about your beginnings, obviously, as you found out about the drum set and just, you know, everything from, you know, who gave you your first set of sticks to, you know, what was the first time you actually touched the drum and the drum set? So any of that you would love to share with us.
Well, this sounds like a challenge for me to mention something I haven't recounted before. Well, at the risk of being a little bit redundant, I can say that you know, I was not a pots and pans drummer. My father gave me a couple of drums when I was quite young. One of them was a conga drum from Cuba, and I still have it.
Wow.
Another was a doumbek, a beautiful copper doumbek that I still have. And so hand drumming and then moving to sticks. I mean, at a pretty early age, I was still 5, Ulysses, when I asked my father, "Can I start taking drum lessons?"
Wow.
You know, okay, here's the thing I've never talked about publicly.
Okay.
I was barely off the bottle, meaning, you know, milk. My father was a doctor, a psychiatrist, in fact, and his uh, fellow uh, psychiatrist friends and physicians expressed some concerns about me, and they felt I needed to be tested because I didn't speak in complete sentences,
Wow.
um, and I didn't have to. I could just kind of look or point at something and grunt, and my every wish was made. It came true. I had a very attentive older sister who Peter wanted something, boom, Peter got it. Uh, and and my father tried to wean me off the bottle, and we had a little ceremony, and he took me to the fireplace. Bottles were made of glass back in those days,
Mm.
and he said, "Peter, we're gonna put the bottle in the fire in the fire. We're gonna say goodbye to the bottle." I said, "Okay." So we did that, and then I turned to him and I said, "Okay, let's get a new bottle." And I mean, I was old enough. I was making my own chocolate milk bottles, and uh, that's it's a little bit messed up, I guess. So anyway, when I finally stopped with that oral fixation, then I was able to get into a little more of drumming fixation.
Cool.
So I started drumming young, but I I got off the teat quite late in life.
I love that, man. Can you also tell me, Peter, maybe what was the first pair of drumsticks you ever remember like getting? Like, cause I don't know at that point. There's not a Vic Firth or not,
Oh
Pro Mark,
man.
any of that stuff. So like, do you remember your first set of
Well,
drumsticks?
I remember there are three drumsticks, three
Mm-hmm.
different pair of drumsticks I remember. One,
Mm-hmm.
um, the drumsticks uh, were coated in some sort of synthetic. They almost felt like ceramic. I know they weren't, but it was some weird white.
Okay.
Uh, it might have had a wooden core to it,
Mm-hmm.
but they were strange, and that was the
Okay.
thing. This is like 1960.
Yeah.
The other sticks I remembered had the butt ends about 1.5 or 2 inches were blue, and every once in a while you'll find them online. And I'd totally forgotten about them until just a few weeks ago. I happened to
Mm-hmm.
see a photo of them of a similar pair of sticks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then the other sticks I remember was when my older sister took me to meet Gene Krupa. Gene Krupa was playing.
Whoa.
He's playing on the steel pier. They had a big ballroom. The steel pier
Yeah.
extended out into the Atlantic Ocean about a half mile. And she took me and knocked on his door. Now I was already, checking out
Mm-hmm.
Art Blakey,
Yeah.
um, Specs Powell, but of course, also Gene Krupa.
Yeah.
And she knocked on his door, and there's Gene Krupa.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "Mr. Krupa, my little brother Peter, he's a drummer." So he kind of half invited us in to his dressing room, and he handed me his pair of sticks, and I remember they were a dark brown, wooden
Mm-hmm.
color. So not what normally we think of sticks more, a hickory or
Right.
maple, a lighter colored or complexion stick. These had a dark color to them, and I think that was not uncommon in older
Mm-hmm.
drumsticks. Anyway, so he hands me the sticks, Ulysses, and he points to a wooden chair, and he said, "Play something."
Oh my. Wow.
So I had my traditional grip, and I just
Oh
zoop
wow.
dab zoop dab ba-doop ba-doop ba-doop. And I still remember what he said to me. I'm playing, and he looks at me and he said, "Yeah, kid, yeah." So
That was it.
that was it. That's all I
Wow.
remember. He just said, "Yeah, kid, yeah." So I handed him the sticks back, and I always remembered those drumsticks. When I was in high school, we were. Oh, there you go. That's with Lewis. That's with Lewis Hayes. I was 7 years old.
Yeah.
I just turned 7.
Yeah.
Um, in high school, we were always looking for a stick that wouldn't break. Now,
Mm.
Regal Tip. I was still in grade school when those came out, and those, all of a sudden it was possible to make your cymbals at home sound a little bit like what at least what Grady Tate's cymbals sounded like on all those Rudy Van Gelder recordings.
Okay.
So uh, that was a big deal, because it was
Mm.
impossible to get your drums at home to sound anything like they did on recordings, and the Regal Tip
Wow.
plastic tip stick was the first hint of, okay, you know, uh, that's pretty cool the way they made this simple. And I wasn't sophisticated enough to appreciate the beauty of this 18-inch K that I had.
Wow.
It was quite something, and I discovered it later in life, and
Mm.
played it to the point where I cracked it behind Michael Brecker one night.
Oh, wow. But Peter, I wanted to go. Two things I wanted to go back to. You were talking about how it was hard to get things to sound like the records. Is that because, I mean, obviously there's you becoming more mature like those players, but was there really a difference in what you had access to in terms of to buy at the store or buy from the store versus people playing on the
Um,
records?
you know, I I probably didn't change drum heads for a
Okay.
long, long time, uh, and I didn't really know that much about tuning. And recording's a different world.
Hmm.
Um, and and ultimately, I could get closer and closer. And then once I started spending some time in the studio, oh, that's what's going on. And it was funny. Uh, Still early in my recording career, I was on the road with Maynard Ferguson, and we
Hmm.
went into the studio. This is like 1976, and Harvey Mason, who was also from southern New Jersey, where I grew up. Harvey
Hmm.
he was the big hero from Atlantic City, New Jersey, and I was a few towns over. And Ralph Peterson grew up right between where Harvey and I
Wow.
grew up.
Wow.
So anyway, Harvey uh, was quite helpful. We were only in there for one day, and then the real guys were going to take over. But they were letting the road band record one of the tunes on the album. And Harvey said, let me hear what these drums sound like. And when he got to the final tom tom, it kind of sounded like, I don't know, it had as much tone as the drum seat did. I mean, it was very dead. And he hit it. And he looked at me. He said, this is going to record the best, believe it or not. And I just wasn't used because live I was used
Right.
to the drums ringing and having sustain, um, and processing all these things. But we aspired to sound like our heroes,
Right.
um, and then what started happening. I'm kind of jumping forward in years. I've
Hmm.
seen this with a number of my students at
Hmm.
the Thornton School of Music at the University
Right.
of Southern California, where they find what I would call like a boutique cymbal,
Hmm.
kind of a hand hammered, maybe overly hammered, but generally they're kind of on the dry side,
Hmm.
and they have an interesting kind of a tonal characteristic, especially when you're on top of it. And you play that cymbal and you go, boy, that sounds pretty cool, but
Hmm.
they don't project.
Hmm.
So that's an education with the students. Like, what might sound very good right here doesn't necessarily sound like much
Yep.
out front. And what we forget is that sustain, ringing, tone, whatever, is a vital part of the projection, the carrying of the sound. I mean, indeed,
Yes.
that's the whole nature of sound is vibration.
Yeah.
Um, you don't need a degree in physics or acoustics to figure that one out.
Right.
So um, when stuff sounds, how can I put it? I think you need to gain a little bit of number one understanding, number two trust
Yeah.
in how your drums will sound out front,
Hmm.
and a lot of times I'll have one of my colleagues or friends, even a student, whoever, play on my drums, and I'll go out front and listen, and then I'll play, and they'll listen,
Mm-hmm.
and you start to develop not just an ear, but again a sense of trust for what the instrument can sound like.
No, I love that, man. And the other point I wanted to bring up was you mentioned a name, some influences that inspired you early on when you were kind of, learning and getting the sticks in the hand. You mentioned someone like Specs something.
Max Powell.
Oh man, I've never heard that name before.
He 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 was a drummer in New York who spent as much time, I think, playing percussion. Xylophone, timpani,
Okay.
whatever, kind of a utility studio percussionist as well as drum set player. He was a terrific drummer, and I loved the album cover, and so it's like a moving truck, a
Wow.
large truck, and filled with furniture and all sorts of other things. And in the very back, it's a nice reclining chair, a table, a lamp that's plugged in, and a drum set, and he's sitting like he's in his living room.
Yeah.
And the title of the album was "Moving In,"
Wow.
and it's taken on a street in New York City. So, wow, this is it. And even when you're that young, just sometimes just the way an album looked or a photograph would just capture your imagination.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was just so hip. So I wanted to be that cool. And and I'm listening. I was listening a lot to Art Blakey when I was young. And then also some Tito Puente, Henry Mancini,
Yeah.
and then some of the wacky kind of late '50s bachelor music of like Esquivel and Les Baxter and Martin Denny and stuff that's kind of quaintly corny, if anything, nowadays. But back then, a lot of these recordings were made to feature stereo.
Right. Right.
So you can impress your friends, like, wow, the sound goes from here to there. And so Dick Shorey had these incredible percussion albums. Don Lamond was a drummer on a number of albums. And so my dad was fond of getting me anything that had to do with percussion, any records he would bring home. But luckily, those included Art Blakey, and the good and bad thing about that, Ulysses, is that my teacher brought me a Jim Chapin album where he was playing the basic independence studies, modern techniques for the advanced drummer. I forget what the actual name of the book was, because I sort of rejected it out of hand when I was young, because I'm looking at this stuff and my teacher assigned it to me, and and I'm like, I don't hear Art Blakey playing this, and so I was kind of like, who needs this? I'd rather do what Art Blakey's doing, and what this guy's doing is not that interesting to me. So I had to play catch up. Actually, once I went on the road as a professional, to iron out a lot of the kinks and bad habits that I'd gotten into. Basically, not being able to keep the ride pattern going while I got interested with the left hand or bass drum.
Some independent stuff. Cool. And before we get into your career, because obviously you have such a vast career, you talked a lot about Blakey, and I love so much about Blakey because he inspires me, and I think I got to his playing a little bit later, obviously moaning. But I think more when I became a band leader, that's when I really got tapped into his playing. So are there maybe like 2 to 3 like very definitive characteristics from his playing that you can say, like, I got this? Like for me, the press roll and just the way that he, rides the cymbal and the way he sets things up, But what would you say for you spoke to you about his characteristics, in terms of his drumming,
Ulysses, look, I'm not blowing smoke, but I gotta say, you ask some of the best questions. They're thought provoking and they're different. I like this.
Well, you the man.
Um,
I was journaling, man. Like, what am I gonna ask him? He's never heard before.
no, no, these are great. And because you've written a book, I just wanted to finish up the thought.
Sure.
I think it was my first drum book.
Okay.
I was joking with my son earlier. I just became a grandfather, and I said, if you thought
Oh,
my
congrats.
thank you. If you thought my dad humor was bad, well, the grandpa humor is really getting corny. But anyway, I wrote in the book, one of the chapters, give me liberty or give me Jim Chapin's phone number.
I'm totally stealing that. Insert Peter Erskine's name.
So what? Okay, the question about Art Blakey. Now, the recordings that I initially heard of Blakey were there was the first one was on Columbia, and it was the African drumming ensembles, the one with Cubano chant and Oscar Lipso, Oscar Pettiford, Sabu Martinez was, I think, one of the conga drummers. I don't know if can't remember, but Papa Joe is playing timpani
What?
on that. Yep.
Whoa.
And it's just amazing. I apologize for not knowing the exact title of the album. We should maybe
We'll
King
get
can
Rachel.
look it up.
Yeah. Can we, Rachel? Can we find that? You said it has Cubano chant on there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, so it starts off with this. Speaking of chant, this other tune begins with this call and response kind of a chant, and then this fast up tempo, congo, duck, doo doo, duck, doo doo, duck, doo doo, duck, and then Blakey kind of with brushes, and it's just swinging.
Wow.
It's insane. It's
Wow.
insane. It's just so exciting. And that was my first dose of Blakey, was hearing him play brushes. And then, of course, the press was. Then he did this other album. And this was on Blue Note with Yusef Lateef. And that was also like the African American drum ensemble or something like that. And he plays a solo. It's a tune. It's 6/8 or 12/8. One.
Yeah.
Playing a little penny whistle. It's a very friendly, of course, a tune that would appeal to an 8 or 9-year-old. But then Blakey plays this solo.
Wow.
And I'll try singing it.
Please.
So take it. Push.
Woo.
You guessed it.
Wow.
So then he does a couple. Boom. And so the bass is just kind of walking along.
Yeah.
And then at the end, push. Push, and like the loudest. And then the tune comes back in. So,
wow.
Having been exposed also to some Buddy Rich recordings, and the other big mind blower, of course, was Rich versus Roach. So
yeah.
So Buddy is like, it's amazing. Like when you could compare listening to Buddy as a young drummer back then to what it must have felt like to children in more recent years, like the first time they watched Star Wars.
Wow.
Or they're just like, holy cow, So it was another world,
Wow.
and it was amazing, and it was like some Star Wars shit. Meanwhile, Max or the Blakey thing, I was like, yeah, I could do that.
I'm coming back, Peter. Keep going.
All right. So, it was attainable. It was realistic, and it was something I could hear and I could digest and I could speak back to the record.
Wow.
So, in terms of learning the language of drumming, Blakey and Roach, not to minimize it, to me, the brilliance of it is that they spoke in such an elemental way, and I've never put it this way before, but thanks to your question,
Cool.
you could speak it back to them. Where the buddy stuff's like I wouldn't even know where to start with that.
Yeah.
Only now do I sort of like, okay, I hear what he's doing. I can't do it,
Right.
but I at least understand it. But as a kid, it was amazing. I loved it, but I had no desire to try to go anywhere near that.
Wow. Well, that really amazes me because when I listen to your playing, which, obviously I want to transition to talking about the career with your playing, but like when I listen to it, I hear that same clarity and what you talked about, even when you sung Blakey solo, there's this repetition but clarity in his ideas, right? And I felt like that's what you have. And so as we move into, obviously, from your influences into your career, what do you feel, because obviously I know you started, Stan Kenton Orchestra and all that, but, as you evolve into the Peter Erskine in, Weather Report and, all the other stuff that you've done with the great artists, even Alan Pasqua and, all the stuff you're doing even now, like what was that thing that someone may have said to you that helped you to evolve? Like, for instance, Mulgrew Miller told me many years ago, Ulysses, if you learn how to play that ride cymbal, you will never not work a day in your life. So what was that thing that you were told that took you from being literally this, cool kid who met Gene Krupa to literally now you will forever be known as one of the greatest drummers in the history of this music?
Thanks. I don't know about that, but
come on, Peter.
My dad used to always, he'd come in when I was practicing. He was a psychiatrist, so his psychology was good. He'd always start off with something positive, but he'd say, "Gotta be dirty. You gotta play funkier, or you gotta dig into that ride cymbal more.
Yeah,
you gotta dig into that ride cymbal."
Yeah.
And then it was Ed Sof at the summer camp who really clarified how to start playing the ride cymbal.
Wow.
That when I was 12 years old, so then I really started working on that. The big band instructor I had in high school at the Interlochen Arts Academy, a gentleman named Dave Sporney, who's still with us.
Wow.
He would, when he would rehearse the band, so he's like, trumpets, So, rehearsal letter D, so he was singing like all these really great drum fills. And I heard them. And he would invite me and other students. We'd go to his home and we'd check out recordings. So I'm really getting more and more into Don Lamont and Mel Lewis and Ozzie Johnson. So that was a big part of it. But the unspoken advice came. It was Max Roach by way of Joe Morello.
Really?
And Joe Morello's solo on Take 5. Yeah, because that's pure Max to my ears.
Wow.
And what's interesting, and not to denigrate anything that Joe Morello ever played, but when you listen to the studio recording of Take 5, and you compare it to some of the videos, like the videos, I feel like, all right, Joe's trying to, he's playing a little flashier. He's getting away from what makes that solo so great.
Yeah.
Which was again the melodic, motivic thing.
Yeah.
And it doesn't try to be anything other than what it is. So if there's anything valuable out of this, Ulysses, I think it's when we play anything. And here's the point. I think it can be note wise, it can be dense,
Mm-hmm.
or it can be very open,
Mm-hmm.
as long as people recognize the truthfulness
Mm-hmm.
of it. And when it's not truthful, then I think, sooner or later, or most people will smell that. It's just like if you're watching an actor or actress, you can tell.
Right.
You instantly kind of feel like, yeah or no. My wife and I were watching a movie last night,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure it won't win an Academy Award, but we enjoyed it. And it's a new. Yeah, we're looking for like a new film because we've watched a lot of movies. And so Liam Neeson and Lawrence Fishburne and some other actors.
Oh,
The Ice Road.
I see.
Did you see
Yeah, I watched that the other night. Yeah, I actually liked it.
Yeah, I did too. But we're watching the scene, and one of the early scenes with Lawrence Fishburne. I think like when he's down in the repair pit of the truck.
Right.
I don't want to give anything away, but
Yeah.
he has a scene with a guy.
Yeah.
And I turned to my wife and I said, "Boy, it doesn't matter what's in the script. This guy,
Yeah.
he sells it so beautifully. Like
Right.
I'm in this universe."
Right.
And Fishburne is like, he's just so. When I say effortlessly good, I don't minimize the amount of effort it takes to do that,
Mm-hmm.
the amount of skill.
Yeah.
But also just there's something, the honesty of it. I mean, it worked. And it totally made the rest of the film work, I think.
No, I agree with you. And I think, again, that's one of the things that we love about your playing. Can you tell us anything, Peter, about, the weather report years? I know you have books on that stuff, and even all the other experiences you had, like maybe some really, like maybe a cool weather report, like story, but from the perspective of maybe like the drummer, like maybe the perspective of you, like when you showed up to this cool session, maybe, did you ever forget anything?
I got a question for you first. So, all right, Lawrence Fishburne, what's the first song you think of?
You said the first song?
The first film you think of.
Oh, for
Lawrence
film?
Fishburne.
Oh, for me, Lawrence Fishburne, I think of Boys in the Hood. Which he was,
Apocalypse
I mean.
Now for me.
Really? Yeah. I mean, for me, like that was.
so young, but
Yeah.
Well, at least neither of us said Matrix. That's good.
Right. Oh, I get it. Well, in that case.
I saw him backstage. We were doing a tribute to Joni Mitchell.
Yeah.
I think it was a tribute to Joni Mitchell, and it was one of, I don't know if it was the Beacon, but it was one of these theaters where it might have been the Beacon, because the Beacon has like a lot of levels and stairways for different dressing rooms.
Yeah.
And I stop at the landing, the door opens.
Yeah.
There I'm standing on the landing, and there's Lawrence Fishburne, and we stopped, and he had seen me, playing earlier, I guess. So we give each other that kind of look,
No, he's dope cat, man.
That made my day.
Yeah, he hung out at Dizzy's a lot, man. Especially before the pandemic, and he'd just be hanging at the bar, and and it wasn't on some like celebrity thing. Like he's really into the music, Which,
oh, no kidding.
To your point about his acting and the way that he sinks or commits himself, I should say, to a role, you could tell he's incredibly artistic, and not just, okay, this is movie number 20 for him, So,
Mm-hmm. Well, Wendell Pierce, I know he's a big jazz fan, and he talks about how listening to jazz has helped him figure out, certain monologues or speeches, and we theater runs in our family. Our son's an editor, and I'm here in his editing suite in Hollywood right now. That's I'm killing a little bit, well, not killing time, but because I've rehearsed this morning with the Los Angeles Phil.
Yeah.
At the Hollywood Bowl. Everyone's so happy to be back.
Oh man, I can't wait to get back there. It's a great venue.
It's great, and we were doing one of the movements from the Duke Ellington Three Black Kings suite. It's one of the final pieces of music. He was dictating it to Mercer from the hospital bed. And so this is the Martin Luther King movement.
Wow.
And then I'm doing a Bernstein piece this evening in rehearsal for preparation for concerts this week. Yeah, fun. So anyway, so our son's an editor, and our daughter Maya has a TV show called Pen 15.
Yeah, I heard you guys got some recent things to be congratulated about.
Yeah, two Emmy nominations.
Yeah, congrats, man.
That's nice. I mean, it's kind of like with the Grammys. You know, if you get one, they're great. If you don't get one, they're dumb.
I'm still on that too, Peter. It's like nobody needs it anyway.
I once had this guy. I won't mention his name, but we're there, you know, giving of our time to. It was when they had the high school Grammy Jazz Band, and so I was asked to attend this concert, and so I was just standing there and all, you know, good spirits, and they had a large Grammy replica on the stage, and this guy comes up to me. I guess always the bridesmaid, never the bride when it came to getting a Grammy. And he comes up and he gets right in my ear and kind of interrupts me because I'm listening to the band, you know. And he goes, kind of a little nudge in the ribs. He says, "Bet you wish you had one of those, huh?" So I look at him, and I said kind of loud, I said, "Yeah, you know what? To join the other two I already have on my fireplace, man."
Yeah, Peter.
Nice.
Yeah, Peter. I love it, Peter. Man, I wanted to ask you about something that I think was how I met you. I talked earlier about in your intro about Modern Drummer magazine, and I talked about how, you know, you were in all these ads, right? Like you're the first guy that was like, I want, you know, one day I want to add, like, you know, like Peter. But there's been a very obvious evolution that you've made from playing Yamaha drums to, you know, DW to now. I mean, you're the man responsible for me playing Tama drums. So without any necessarily like specifics about the business side of the switch, but can you maybe talk about like how is it that you've gotten with these various companies and you find such a very specific sound? But even from when you played Yamaha to Tama, you know, though obviously there's some slight differences, but there's always that Peter Erskine sound. And I always say, I'm like, how is it this guy can go from one situation to another one and like it's just that identifiable thing that makes you is there. So I don't know how much of that you want to speak about, but it'd be interesting to get any insight. You know.
Well, thanks. I think the big part of it, and I'm no different from you or any other drummer, is that, as we were talking about earlier, you get a sound in your head.
Right.
And the more that sound becomes part of your, how should I put it, what you're expecting to hear, you get a pretty good knack of making that sound happen. So, you know, you can't do it on any instrument. There are certain settings where things just don't go your way. You know, if basically if anything is extreme, if something is tensioned in the extreme, then that calls more attention to that factor than anything else. But if you have the drums tuned more or less the same general pitch area that you're used to working in, and the big lesson for me was when Buddy Rich sat in on my drum set with the Kenton band.
Whoa!
It sounded like Buddy.
Wow.
You know.
Wow.
And so part of it is just, you know, what you expect it to sound like, and so you can get there. But what happens with drum? And by the way, I'm going to go on the record because occasionally my son always tells me, "Dad, why do you read that stuff?" But I'll come across something, or it might be a YouTube comment, and then you know, sooner or later I'll see the word drum and whore adjacent. This guy is a drum whore. And I have changed a few times, but not nearly as often as at least a half dozen drummers I could name.
Yeah.
My father. Shots
fired.
oftentimes what happens is that, the music business music industry business is not that big, and oftentimes the changes are just because there's been a big upheaval or shift in personnel at a company.
Absolutely.
So if you've invested a lot of time and years, and all of a sudden a company fires your guy or your girl, your person, a couple times I left different companies just kind of in protest. This is a really bad idea, and
right.
I protest. And,
right.
Other times it would be because you get into a negative energy relationship with someone or the entire team at a company, and you just feel like, all right, this is not good for me. And a professional drummer, whether he or she are with a company, all of us are exactly the same as any drummer out there watching this. We're all just looking for the sound that turns us on.
Right.
And part of what makes that a practical reality, as you know, is that when, if you pick up a cymbal stand, right, and you get a hernia doing it, or you can just pick it up and boom and set it up, and I have to reposition it. Oh, I'm going to risk another hernia because this thing weighs 45 pounds.
Right.
Or, that was easy.
Right.
And you don't always find the stuff that works that way. So, I can say with complete confidence that my searching days are over.
Great.
I was with Yamaha for 25 years. I was with Slingerland before that, and
oh wow,
that made sense when I went on the road and with the big bands. Slingerland was part of that triumvirate of Reno, Slingerland, and Zildjian.
Right.
They were, and Ludwig, of course, was a very big name. But with the big bands, that was a very powerful alliance and combination of companies. But then, I discovered Yamaha and just how, the ingenuity of their hardware design, specifically in the way the drum shells were made and how they sounded. And then it was a bit of an impulsive decision to leave after 25 years. I've been known to make impulsive decisions, but there was a big upheaval with persons at the company, and
right.
And DW was there, and they were right up the Pacific Coast Highway from where I live, and that was a lot of fun, working intimately with an American drum company, and I thank them for all that brought. But I realized I was missing something, and what I was missing was, to be honest, was a Japanese drum company touch.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Now, my family, we're half Japanese. I mean, my wife is from Tokyo, and our children are half and half, and so there are a lot of things that just the care, the manner in which how it is when you're dealing with the good people from Tama. The energy is just so positive. It's so tranquil. It's so respectful, and the drums are amazing. And here was the deal: when I went with Tama, and I had no financial interest in the flat bass stand, but I said, I will do it if you promise to make a cymbal stand as close to the old Ludwig flat bass.
Wow, which I'm crazy about. Wow,
they agreed. And they even let me pick the font for the package.
Wow!
And if it looks at all familiar to any of you old timers, it's the old Sony Clarendon font.
Wow!
That took a little digging and Googling for me to find that.
Peter, Peter, I love that you talked about the Japanese craftsmanship, because I feel like, I played Yamaha drums. I was with them for a period of time, and then switch, and then coming back to Tama. You're right that just to me the Japanese craftsmanship, and even just I feel like the specificity in everything from the lugs to how the drum sits, and then even as with the Tamas, it's not just the way the drum is mounted on the tom, but then there's all these other extra things within the mount, and so I love that you talked about that, because I know for me that I was missing that, and in a lot of ways I see some similarities in what I enjoyed about Yamaha drums, especially years ago, and what Tama has taken to a new level. So I love that you mentioned that, because I feel like also they're handmade drums, and not many companies are hand making things anymore.
Yeah, the Star drum is insane, and
yeah.
The new signature snare drum, which is just what the world needs, is another snare drum. But maybe this one the world does need. It's a 4.5-inch depth, of course 14-inch diameter, 8 lugs, stick saver hoops. It's got my favorite strainer, silent, works beautifully. That's why we went to the 4.5 depth, because otherwise it'd have to be the snap up one, which makes noise. The incredible percussionist Bob Becker, along with the wonderful snare drummer Bill Platt, formerly of the Cincinnati Symphony, they both recommended, why don't you try with the reinforcing ring around the top, with the batter side only, not the bottom.
Whoa,
so the bottom
interesting.
Kind of free to sing, but we'll really kind of focus and tighten up that batter sound, and the hardware is not too heavy, so that doesn't really change the way the shell responds, and it's just the presence, the snap, the clarity, the power of the drum. I was A-Bing it today at the bowl, and my drum cards guy was like, "No," he said, "your drum is the one to use." He said, "It just sounds the best in here." And so if anyone needs, I ordered one drum from Tama.
Okay.
And it's the Kenny Aronoff.
Which is a killing drum. That's a great drum.
But I did a session in Hollywood recently, and it was a tune from the '70s. So we rented a vintage, like a Ludwig kit from the '70s. And it was a 6.5 superphonic, and it was just so easy to play this track, because and so I asked Tama, what would be the closest snare, and they went, well, the Kenny Aronoff. So I can't wait for that to arrive.
Nice.
And that's what I need, another snare drum.
Exactly right. well, Peter, I know I only have a few minutes with you left, because I know you're in the middle of rehearsals and all that. But a couple questions I wanted to ask, because one of the cool things about Open Studio and the work that I've been doing with them, particularly, is that we are very much about helping musicians on any level get to the next level. And one of the questions that I've often received from a lot of drummers, particularly during my work with Open Studio, is, how do I get to the next level of playing for gigs? How do I become a drummer that can get more gigs? And then the other questions are from young drummers who, as you know, are bombarded now with so much information, because before we were learning things that you talked about via record recordings, and that was kind of it. Now you've got so many different ways for people to really be really inundated with information. So my two questions are, one, if you were to say, hey, what are 3 things Peter Erskine says drummers should know to get better or be able to acquire more gigs? And I don't mean high-end gigs, but just being able to stay busy. And then lastly, what would you say are a few things younger or emerging drummers need to be thinking about sort of today, in the state of jazz and the state of music that we're in?
Okay. First, a quick anecdote, and then the points. So one of the first sessions I did in New York, when I moved to New York City, is like 1982, and it was some TV show. And I'm, telling jokes. I'm being I'm counting off on the center of I don't know what. I got a phone call the next morning from the producer, and I said, "Oh, hey, man, He goes, listen, I just wanted to tell you that none of us in the control room appreciated all the smart ass BS that we heard.
Wow.
And I just thought you should know that. And,
Wow.
click. And so what do you do with that? And
Wow.
I said, yeah, well, so uh, it went back to something one of my teachers told me when I was young, but the dots finally connected. Um, be quiet.
Mm.
Uh, don't cause trouble, and just go in and take care of business. So um,
Hmm.
do your homework, and that could be as listen, know the music, um, uh, know the language. You got to know the vocabulary. If I get called to do uh, for one night, music of Simon and Garfunkel, well, I'm going to listen to the music of Simon and Garfunkel to have some sort of idea what what I should do. I'm not going to plead ignorance. So you do your homework. If you want to work, I think you need to be able to read.
Mm-hmm.
And there are two levels of reading. One is just the simple mathematical ability to read one rhythm after another. And then the second part is knowing how to interpret what's on a page into something that makes sense on the drums. And experience will be your best teacher. But if you're in doubt, try to find a recording uh, that of some music that you can get a hold of, and listen to how that drummer interprets what's on the page and the kind of choices that they make in terms of either playing the rhythms with the band or playing before, playing the holes, not playing, whatever. So, learn the language, do your homework, know how to read, and don't be a jerk.
I love that. I love that. No, that's so helpful. And you would say that for any generation at this point, right? Whether it's somebody emerging, like emerging drummers. Obviously, these are key things in any situation. But what about when people say things like jazz drummers, which I heard this recently, jazz drummers don't sound like jazz drummers anymore. Like, do you have any advice around cats need to, learn this level of discography, or what are your thoughts around that topic, especially because you teach, obviously, in preparing today's drummers,
Which jazz drummers don't sound like jazz drummers? You mean they're saying like
the new
newer
generation, I hear that a lot, for instance, I played a gig, a year or so ago at Dizzy's before the pandemic, and I was just swinging, and one of my friends said, man, it's so great to hear someone, who wants to swing. And so, I've taught a lot of younger drummers who either avoid swing, others who love to do everything else, but they also make sure that they learn that. So, which leads to a lot of interesting conversations around the state of jazz drumming today. So it'd be interesting to hear what you think about any of that.
I'll put it this way, Ulysses. It doesn't have to be such a binary thing. Because much of what I hear younger drummers doing today just is astonishingly great. I mean, it's amazing how the boundaries are being pushed. So I'm not going to be an old timer.
Yeah.
But here's the criterion for me. If the music dances. So here's a good example. You're familiar with Lewis Cole, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and Lewis was in our top jazz band. He studied with me. I can't take credit for all the amazing stuff he does, but he's got the bona fide jazz thing.
Yeah.
So, but I wouldn't say he's a jazz drummer, and he can play pretty densely, but it always dances. It always has that feeling of life, and what we talked about earlier, this honesty and this feeling of So basically, here's your test. If you can see Fred Astaire when you listen to somebody,
I love that.
Then and substitute another dancer. You don't dig on Fred Astaire, but I think everybody digs on Fred Astaire. And then fine. But if it doesn't swing, if it doesn't dance, then and here's the thing about with drummers, and I'm thrilled if another drummer likes what I do, right? That's nice. But if, like, you're in your room there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you got the door closed and you play.
Mm-hmm.
Now, me and Steve Gadd and Eric Harlan, we could all be on the other side of the door.
Mm-hmm.
Or it might be Dave Weckl and Vinnie
Right.
Colaiuta on the other side of the door, or it might be, your cousin and their
Right.
best friend on the other side of the door, and it might be nobody on the other side of the door.
Right.
Does that change the way you're playing in that room? No.
Oh.
If not right, it just sounds like what it sounds like. So, it's only in our head so I learned not to play for other drummers, and ultimately, because I guess I figured out, if we're talking in terms of practical gig value, other drummers aren't the people that are going to call me up
Right.
to hire.
Right. Right.
Right.
Right.
It's going to be a piano player, going to be a bass player, so they're looking for a dynamic blend. Oh, here's some other good advice. Learn to play with your eyes open. Visual communication is very important in a band, and play with your ears open so you're not playing too loud. And basically, here's your test for that. This is my final bit of wisdom, or whatever. If you can't hear every other instrument on the bandstand,
Yeah.
then you're playing too loud.
Yep. Yep.
It's as simple as that.
I love that, Peter. And I think it's really important to hear those words of wisdom from someone like you who has maintained a career for multiple decades. And one of the things I talk about is, to me, the greatest artists not only have their own sonic footprint out in the world, but they also have a sustainable career. And that is definitely you, man. So I just appreciate you taking time from your busy day and allowing me to also talk to you and interview you. And also, I want to thank you for being so encouraging, man. I talk a lot about young musicians really making sure they pursue mentor and mentee relationships. And though I don't get to talk to you a lot, every time I've had a chance to chat with you, you've been so encouraging. And so that, to me, is a huge thing, because some artists get to a certain level of I would say stardom, and where they just don't give people access to them. And I want to thank you for always opening up your heart and letting me get wisdom from you, and also making a couple phone calls for me. So I seriously, it means a lot. Thank you.
My great pleasure. I'm always it's always so exciting to hear you play, and also if you don't mind my
Please.
sharing. And I'm not saying that this is what you have to do, folks, but the day after I heard from Ulysses that things had happened as a result of a phone call, the next day I got this beautiful, incredibly generous, very generous gift of some exquisite Japanese whiskey from you. And I told my wife, we both said that this guy's going to go far. And not because you gave me whiskey, but because you were so thoughtful, and you just understood the way of things. And so, I'm of course grateful for that, but more grateful just for your beautiful spirit and your talent, and that you're carrying the music forward. All we're trying to do is pay it forward, and it's in the best possible hands with you.
Wow. Well, Peter, thank you so much, and I appreciate you, man. And hopefully we can have some of that whiskey together one day. So, or a new bottle. A new bottle.
New bottle.
Yeah.
No, not from you, but I got one sitting at home, and it shall remain unopened until you come out and visit.
Yeah, well, I'll have to ask you for trivia. What's your favorite Japanese whiskey? Because that's like I love Japanese whiskey.
I think it's that bottle you sent me.
Well, because I can't remember. Was it Yamazaki? No, I can't remember. Was it Yamazaki? That's like just debates about different kinds of whiskey. To me, Yamazaki 17-year is a beautiful one. I know you probably have. What's the whiskey selection from Peter Erskine?
But you know, I had a recent health
Oh, okay.
event. So that's kind of on the no fly list for
Ah,
me
okay, okay.
at the moment.
So
Um,
tonic water. Right, yeah. Well, we need you around, man. So whatever you got to do.
Thank you. Well, cheers, bottoms up, everyone.
Right. Peter, thanks so much, man.
Thank
And I
you.
want to and I want to say thanks so much to the audience that is here. Next week we will be having the incredible Nate Smith that's going to be on here making some music with us. Yeah, right. Nate
Oh
Smith
man.
is an incredible drummer with a broad range. I always laugh at him. I'm like, I'm glad that everybody's going crazy over you now playing funk grooves, but I wish they were doing that even more when you were playing with Dave Holland. So we're going to talk a lot about that, or when he played with Betty Carter, But it's the same, with everybody. There's always the gigs that everyone sort of takes to. But anyway, so we got Nate Smith coming up.
The Betty Carter School.
Right,
That,
right, and which I talked to, Eric Harlan, obviously Lewis Nash, like just talking to them, and Betty. I mean, she deserves her own plaque in the Drum Hall of Fame.
you're right.
So
You're absolutely right.
so anyway, thank you everybody for being here. We will be back at the same time next week, and keep swinging and keep checking out the music and loving the music, and in the words of Peter Erskine, seeking to be authentic. So thank you so much.